Welcome. Today we are jumping headfirst into one of the most intense family showdowns in the entire book of Genesis. Seriously, this story has it all. A secret plot, a desperate escape, a wild chase across the desert, and it all comes to a head on a mountaintop. This is the story of Jacob's great escape from his father-in-law Laban. Let's get right into it.
You know that feeling, don't you? Where the tension in a situation gets so thick you can barely breathe, and every single instinct in your body is just screaming, "Get out, run!" Well, that's exactly where we find Jacob. After 20 long years, he's hit his breaking point, and he knows it is time to go.
So how does this whole thing kick off? Well, it doesn't start with a big explosion. It starts with a whisper. This is Act 1, where the world around Jacob just starts to go sour, and his own home feels more and more like enemy territory.
We start right in verse 1. It says Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons. Now, to really lock this in, just picture Laban's sons huddled together in the shadows. See their faces just twisted with jealousy, and imagine their whispers are like little poison darts aimed right at Jacob's back as he walks by, accusing him of stealing everything their father owns.
And then we get to verse 2. Jacob saw the face of Laban, and it wasn't friendly like it was before. So for this one, picture Jacob looking across the camp at his father-in-law, Laban. And as he looks, imagine Laban's once friendly face literally turning to stone. Just see all the warmth drain out of it, leaving this cold, hard, icy glare. That's it, a friendly face turned to stone.
Right in the middle of all this tension, we get the turning point in verse 3. The Lord says to Jacob, "Return to the land of your fathers, and I will be with you." So imagine this. Jacob is standing in the dark, and all around him are these thorny briars, representing all the suspicion and hostility. Then, boom, a single powerful spotlight shines down from heaven, lighting up a clear path out, and a voice gives him the command and the promise. It's the divine green light.
Okay, so Jacob has his orders, but now he needs to get his family on board. This brings us to a really quick sequence of verses. Verse 4, Jacob calls Rachel and Leah out to the field where his flock is. Picture him waving them over, away from all the tents so they can talk in private. Verse 5, he tells them, "I see that your father's face is not toward me as it was before," but then he says, "The God of my father has been with me." So imagine him pointing back at Laban's tent with a frown and then pointing up to the sky with a look of relief. Verse 6, "You know that I have served your father with all my strength." Picture him flexing his arms, showing off the calluses on his hands from 20 years of hard work. Verse 7, "Yet your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. This is where you can see Jacob holding up both hands, all 10 fingers spread, to drive home every single betrayal. Verse 8 explains how God stepped in. If Laban said the spotted animals were the payment, then the whole flock had spotted young. Just imagine a wave of spotted lambs popping up everywhere. Verse 9, "So God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me." For this one, see a divine hand literally scooping up Laban's sheep and moving them over to Jacob's side of the field. Verses 10 and 11, he tells them about a dream where an angel showed him what was happening. Put a little dream bubble over his head. Verse 12, the angel says, "I am the God of Bethel," which connects all the way back to Jacob's first encounter with God. And then, the clincher in verse 13. The angel commands, "Now arise, go out from this land, and return to the land of your kindred." The case is made, the mission is a go.
And let's just pause on that image from verse 7 for a second because it's so powerful. 10 times. 10 times Laban changed his wages. Imagine Jacob standing there in front of his wives, holding up both hands, all 10 fingers out, just to physically show them the scale of the injustice. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This was a pattern of deception that went on for years.
So what do his wives say to all this? Verse 14, they answer him asking, "Is there any portion or inheritance left for us in our father's house?" Picture them just crossing their arms, shaking their heads. They know the answer is no. Verse 15 is brutal. "Are we not regarded by him as foreigners, for he has sold us?" Visualize their own father, Laban, literally putting them on an auction block and pocketing the money. That's how they feel, like they were just sold off. And verse 16 seals the deal. "All the wealth that God has taken from our father is ours and our children's. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do it." Now see them turn to Jacob, their faces set, giving him this firm, determined nod. "We're with you. Let's go."
So, the family is united. The decision is made. And now we shift from these tense, whispered conversations to swift and silent action. The great escape has officially begun.
All right, things start moving fast. Verse 17, Jacob got up and he put his children and his wives on camels. Picture this scene. It's this flurry of quiet, organized activity. Jacob is lifting his kids up, helping his wives onto these tall camels. That's step 1. Then verse 18, he drove away all his livestock and all his goods to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Now just imagine this massive river of animals, sheep, goats, cattle, all flowing away from Laban's camp, and Jacob is right at the head, his eyes fixed on the horizon, pointing toward home.
And here's where we get a little bit of intrigue. Verse 19, Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and while he's gone, Rachel stole her father's household gods. So picture Rachel, looking over her shoulder, quickly grabbing these small carved idols, the teraphim, and hiding them deep in her camel bags. Then verse 20, and Jacob tricked Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was leaving. The original Hebrew is even more poetic. It says he stole Laban's heart. For this one, picture Jacob putting a finger to his lips, shushing everyone as he leads his family away in total silence. And finally, verse 21, he fled with everything he had, he crossed the Euphrates River, and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. That's it. They've crossed the river. There's no turning back now.
Well, the secret is out, and the whole feel of the story just shifts on a dime. The quiet, stealthy escape is over. Now it's a frantic, heart-pounding chase across the desert.
Yeah, a secret that big doesn't stay secret for long. Verse 22 tells us, when Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. Just imagine a messenger, completely out of breath, running up to Laban with the news. It took 3 whole days for word to even get to him. Verse 23, so he took his kinsman with him and pursued him for 7 days and overtook him in the hill country of Gilead. Now picture Laban, his face just dark with rage, gathering up a posse of his relatives. And then you can see this 7-day chase montage, just a blur of desert landscape, with Laban's crew getting closer and closer and closer every single day. Okay, so the chase is about to end, probably in violence, but then we get verse 24. God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Let's picture that. Laban's asleep, and in his dream this powerful divine figure appears and puts a shimmering ghostly chain around Laban's hands and a lock over his mouth. The message is crystal clear, don't you dare touch him. Then, verse 25 shows us what happens next. Laban finally catches up to Jacob. They're both camped on the same mountain. Laban has him cornered, but because of that dream, his hands are tied. The hunt is over. The chase is done. And now we've arrived. This is the climax of the entire story, the explosive face-to-face confrontation between Jacob and Laban on that mountain.
Laban can't use his fists, so he decides to use words as weapons. Verse 26, what have you done that you have tricked me and carried away my daughters like captives of the sword? Picture Laban just throwing his hands up in the air, acting all hurt, trying to make Jacob look like a kidnapper. Verse 27, why did you flee secretly? I would have sent you away with joy and with songs. He's pretending he would have thrown this huge going-away party for them. It's all an act. Verses 28 and 29, he complains that Jacob didn't let him kiss his grandkids goodbye, and then he boasts, it is in my power to do you harm, but then admits that God warned him not to. And then in verse 30, he finally gets to his real point. Why did you steal my gods? See him just pointing that accusing finger right in Jacob's face? The stolen idols? That's what he's really furious about.
So Jacob responds at first he's afraid, but then he gets defiant. Verse 31, Jacob answers Laban, because I was afraid, he tells the truth. He thought Laban would just take his daughters back by force, but then comes the huge mistake in verse 32. Anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. Just picture Jacob saying this with total confidence, sweeping his hand over his entire family, his entire camp, completely unaware that his favorite wife, Rachel, is the one who's guilty. He just pronounced a death sentence on her without even knowing.
And so the frantic search begins. Verse 33, Laban goes into Jacob's tent, then Leah's tent, then the 2 female servants' tents, and finds nothing. You can just see him tearing through their stuff, getting more and more frustrated. Then, verse 34, now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel's saddle and was sitting on them. There it is. That's the visual. Rachel, sitting perfectly calm on this camel saddle, while the idols everyone is looking for are hidden just inches underneath her. Verse 35, and she says to her father, let not my lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the way of women is upon me. She uses this brilliant, unchallengeable excuse, and the verse ends, so he searched but did not find the household gods. He's been completely outsmarted.
Well, with the search over, Jacob's fear just boils over into pure righteous anger. Starting in verse 36, he just explodes. What is my crime? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? Verse 37, he gestures to all his belongings that Laban just ransacked. What have you found of all your household goods? Verse 38, and then he starts listing his grievances. These 20 years I have been with you. Verse 39, what was torn by wild beast I did not bring to you. I bore the loss myself. You can picture him pointing to old scars on his arms. Verse 40, by day the heat consumed me, and the cold by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. Just imagine these quick flashes of him sweating under a brutal sun and shivering in the freezing frost. Verse 41, he lays it all out. 20 years of work for Laban's daughters and his flocks, and he says, you have changed my wages 10 times. He holds up those 10 fingers again, but this time it's with fury. And then verse 42, he delivers the final blow. If the God of my father had not been on my side, surely you would have sent me away empty-handed. He gives all the credit for his survival and success to God.
Well, after that fiery speech, the confrontation is pretty much over. Laban has lost, and he knows it. So the story shifts one last time. We're moving toward the resolution. And this is not going to be a warm, fuzzy reconciliation. This is about creating a cold, hard boundary. Laban, totally defeated in the argument, tries to change the subject in verse 43, basically claiming that everything Jacob has is really his. Then in verse 44, he pivots. Come now, let us make a covenant. He wants a treaty. So, verse 45, Jacob takes a stone and sets it up as a pillar. Verse 46, he tells his men to gather more stones and they make a big pile. Now this is interesting. Verse 47, Laban calls the pile Jegar Sahaduta in his own language Aramaic. Verse 48, and Jacob calls it Gilead in Hebrew. Both names mean the exact same thing, the heap of witness. This pile of rocks is going to be a permanent, silent witness to their deal.
And they add another name in verse 49, Mizpah, which means watchtower. Laban says, the Lord watch between you and me when we are out of one another's sight. Now this sounds nice, but it's really a warning. In verse 50, he lays out the terms, don't you dare mistreat my daughters, and don't you dare marry any other women. Verses 51 and 52, Laban points to the pillar and says, this is a boundary. I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap to me to do harm. This is a permanent dividing line. And in verse 53, they swear on it. Basically, God is now the security camera on their border, making sure neither of them crosses the line.
So the deal is done. Verse 54, Jacob offers a sacrifice there on the mountain and invites his relatives to eat a meal. They share one last, very formal meal together. Just imagine how tense and quiet it must have been around that fire. And then the very last verse, verse 55. Early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned home. Picture Laban at sunrise, taking one last look, then he just turns his back and walks away, disappearing over the horizon, out of their lives for good.
And that's where this incredible story ends. It leaves us with a really powerful question to chew on. In our own lives, in our own relationships. When does trust break down so badly that a friendly handshake just isn't enough anymore? When do we need to build our own heap of witness, a clear, hard, undeniable boundary line, just to keep the peace? It really makes you think about what happens when reconciliation simply isn't an option.